I've worked in one organisation or another, you know, with like 10 people, 20 people, 30 people, alongside Jeremy Corbyn and John MacDonald for about 30 years.
And they all had revolutionary Marxist front.
And they certainly are far more radical than anything else the Labour Party has had in living memory.
But it's the policy that counts. And
well, it isn't actually the policy that counts.
The second in command to Corbyn has intimated that the ideas from the last manifesto will be included, so the nationalisations I spoke about.
I'm fine with that.
I don't hear anything that qualifies as really radical.
Let me clarify.
It's centrist.
Let me clarify. As somebody who's been involved in Marxist politics for the whole of my adult life, since I was 17, my own view is this. We always used to adopt, I was in a group that was affiliated with or associated with the ideas of Leon Trotsky. And we used to have, there's a pamphlet written by Trotsky, and it's called The Transitional Program and the Tasks of the Socialist Revolution. And those of us, yes, that's right. He always made it's not as bad as Marx. Marx used to make some really catchy books. He had this one book called Against Bruno Bauer, and no, I can't remember the whole term. Sorry, I can't remember it now. It's a really weird, long, complex and unappetizing, but I can't remember it now.
Which you've read and studied.
I haven't actually, but in any case. So Leon Trotsky said the following. He said, a revolutionary is not someone who advocates armed insurrection and the overthrow of the state. A revolutionary is someone who fights for every single reform, even the smallest reform. So one of the slogans of the revolutionaries in the transitional program by Trotsky was not a penny, sorry, not a penny, not a man for the imperialist war. Not a penny, not a man. So all they're saying is, don't give any resources to that. And yet that was a mechanism for mobilizing people around a simple demand that or not everybody, but perhaps 80% of the population would support. But once you mobilize the people around that demand, then you can show people, look how the ruling class responds. And because they respond with violence, aggression, hysteria, that reveals to the people the way in which the balance of forces in society are arranged. You can see this with Jeremy Corbyn at the moment. Even just inviting Jeremy Corbyn for talks in Downing Street, whereby he is considered an equal partner to discuss the dynamics of Brexit, leads to a hysterical reaction on the part of Jacob Rees-Mogg and several other members of the Conservative Party in Parliament who say, you know, we've been pulling the shots on the Brexit debate. Now all of a sudden you're going to put a Marxist in number 10. Hysterical responses.
Predictable.
Now,
predictable.
Yes,
Predictable.
and that's the reason why it is not just a question of what specific demands are raised. For example, in a period of economic downturn, and the latest report, if you look at the front page headline in the Financial Times today, the latest report is that the entire world economy is heading towards a new recession. Germany, industrial production is on the decline. In the United States, the economy is on the decline. Even in China, the economy is slowing down. The consequence of that is, if it's correct that there is to be a new economic recession, is that simply to say to people, we want, for example, if you raise the demand in the labour movement, wages must be tied to a price of living index, and they must not fall below that. If you say to people, we want pensions to remain at the existing age, if you say to people, we want to guarantee that the existing rights of workers in relation to the working week, in relation to lunch breaks, in relation to stress at work and so on, all the rules and regulations of labour laws in Britain, if you say to the people, we will defend those to the hilt,
Are you going to pay for it?
that, you see, this is what will be argued. And that will lead, if there is a clash, if that argument is put by the establishment, and Labour puts the other argument, we will not grant one attack against the workers, not a second on the working day, not a penny off the pay of the workers, a guaranteed increase of wages tied to the cost of living. If that is a demand that the workers' movement, the trade unions, for example, adopts, you are heading towards a direct clash and confrontation. An example of that, look at France. The dispute in France is not about the people with yellow vests demanding better living standards. It's about them saying, we do not want to lose what we've got. And therefore, sometimes in periods of economic crisis and of economic transition, it can be that simply trying to hold on to what you've got brings about a revolutionary crisis in society. And therefore, that answers your question about the manifesto.
You're always, I love the way you cut that up. But you're always trying to engineer.
It's a reasonable argument.
You're always trying to engineer a revolutionary crisis.
No, that's not correct.
That's how the scales will
If
drop
I
from
am
people's
saying,
eyes, the false consciousness.
if I am saying that to defend the existing living standards
which the TUC
of
will
the
do,
people,
and they're not Marxists.
well, the truth of the matter is the TUC does not do it. What they always do is they say, just one sec. The TUC in general will turn around and say, we're opposed to X, Y, and Z. And then they will say, one sec, I've got a, where's my bag? I've got a little power supply. Sorry, give me one sec. In my pocket! In my pocket! Trim that. There you go. It probably won't last long. Are we dead? Oh, storage, I forget that. Sorry, forget it, it's not going to do anything. Storage is storage. Leave it, it's fine. Let it die. Where were we? Oh no, you had a question, what is it? What was that? Go on, come in. Come in a wee bit, ladies and gentlemen. Or gentlemen. What is it about this place? No ladies here nowadays. Oh, well, we've got a couple at the back there.
They're all at work.
They're not at work.
The Labour Party never has and never will be in revolution. There have been some revolutionaries in its ranks. We have been firmly committed as the party to parliamentary socialism since 1918. I would argue before that. It simply isn't going to happen. There's probably only been 3 occasions in the last 200 years where there has been a revolutionary situation in this country. Certainly after the Napoleonic Wars, that was one. Possibly with Chartism, and some argue the Great Unrest, right?
What?
We never come anywhere near.
The general strike.
No, the Great Unrest.
Some argue general strike, but anyway, go on.
Okay, right. Well, there was possibly any remote chance of a revolution in 1926. We've been firmly committed to parliamentary socialism, that you can bring about the socialist society through incremental changes, through changing the laws,
I know that's the argument, yeah.
of the commanding heights of the economy. I know that it's declined and it's been rubbish the last 40 years, but you can bring about, you can build millions of houses for people. You can build schools that will give people education opportunities. I know that Marxists would rubbish that.
No, I don't rubbish it. I don't rubbish it. What I say is the following.
And it can and it will be done again if you win the arguments and you get control of the political institutions. Right? We've done it before, and Corbyn, right, in comparison to Attlee, is a model. But from little acorns might be oaks grow. You start with small little battles, right, and you win them, and then in the end you win the war.
I mean, that you have very eloquently summarised the historical analysis of the left in the Labour Party. Tony Benn, Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell, they argue these type of things and have always argued these type of things. And there were other on the left who argued those ideas as well. There were some, of course, more the right wing who said, well, you know, we want to control that, limit it, but okay, let's ignore them for the time being. Let's assume that what you're saying is correct, and that I'm arguing my point of view alongside that. I'm not going to disagree with you, except in this.
So he was wrong then?
No, 1 minute. I will stand alongside you in trying to bring about those changes. Build millions of homes, improve the living standards, change society peacefully, democratically. I'll stand alongside you, whilst at the same time warning that theory of a parliamentary road to socialism is limited by the fact that the establishment, that the capitalist system, not only in Britain, but worldwide, contradicts the idea that you can bring about socialism by parliamentary means. But I will fight alongside you to try and make that happen, whilst warning that that is unlikely to be the result. So that's the only difference. The difference is that we as Marxists attempt to apply not only the lessons of Britain, which I accept you have quite well summarised, and on the basis of Britain, it would be perfectly logical to assume the arguments that you have made are correct. But of course, Britain is not just an island, although some people would like it to be. Britain is also part of a general world historical dynamic. And that, I believe, indicates that at a certain point, where the mass of people seek change, the ruling classes in society, there used to be a guy, one of the reformists in the Labour Party, he used to, Tawny, and he used to say, you can peel an onion layer by layer, but you can't declaw a tiger claw by claw. The British establishment, the British ruling class, will move hell and high water to stop any significant change to society. The only way to avoid that is by organising, combining and strengthening a movement so powerful, so well organised, that it cannot be stopped by the establishment.
Can you give us
that is a theoretical possibility. I give you an example. I give you an example.
But can you give us any example of the capitalist class getting involved to deny
I give you an example.
Reform of,
I give you an example. Because there are only a few examples in world history. There are only a few examples in world history where a workers' party has come to power electorally and has been able to carry out dramatic revolutionary reforms without being overthrown. And I'll tell you two of them straight away. One, Chile, 1970. 1973, they were overthrown. Two, Venezuela, 1998, and they are now facing being overthrown. So there aren't many examples in world history where a democratic attempt to transform society towards socialism has been able to be carried through without armed resistance attempting to overthrow it. Now, you might argue that the Labour Party in Britain came close to that in 1945. But by the 1960s, they had abandoned socialism, which is, of course, the alternative. You start out arguing for socialism, you begin to carry out radical reform, and then you end up saying social market economy, which means capitalism. And then you end up with Tony Blair and imperialism, bombing Iraq, bombing Afghanistan, bombing Libya, and calling it democratic socialism.
So you never voted for...
I voted Labour.
Right. So
all
you
my
voted
life.
For Tony Blair. That's all I wanted to check. And did you vote all?
Well, as I said, to the gentleman here.
Did you vote for three?
As I said to the gentleman here, I will stand by you. I said I will stand by you in attempting to bring about democratic change through parliamentary means. But that does not mean that I did not warn at the time about what these people would do. Not bad. Who are you? Do I know you?
I'm not so bad as well.
Well, I'm pleased to meet you.
Yeah, I'm pleased to meet you as well.
Good.
Yeah.
How are you, right?
I'm
I'm glad you've got to be. You're on television now.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, it's
we are
thousands
doing it.
watching.
Al Jazeera.
It's like live.
Just ask a question.
Yes.
You said you oppose capitalism.
Hello, man.
What is the opposite to capitalism? So you said you oppose to capitalism. So what do you regard as the opposite to capitalism? So are you calling to a form of worldwide communism or some sort of
Hang on. He's asking something.
So are you calling to some sort of worldwide communism or a form of egalitarian system? And how does that relate to Karl Marx, for example, and Karl Marx's works and what he established back in the 1800s and from the manifesto days? And how is that, what you're doing relate to that? Can I ask? Sorry.
Okay. I believe that if you read what Marx wrote in the Communist Manifesto, I believe that's relevant today.
Okay.
The very simple reason is this. On the one side, he described the dynamics of capitalism in reaching its tentacles in every corner of the world and transforming human economics, politics and culture across the entire planet. It spreads everywhere, automatically, and turns human relations between human beings into relations between exchange, money.
Yes.
From the family to politics to economics to nations, relations are governed by monetary relationships.
So what's the opposite of that?
So the inversion of that, or the transformation of that, I believe can begin in the following way. You take the decisive levers, the top of the economy. In Britain, as an example, there are 6 million private companies in Britain. I believe the 150 top companies should be taken into public ownership.
How much?
Not 6 million.
How much would that be?
0.
What, you're just going to
Take them. I said take them
against the law.
into public ownership.
Against the law.
What about the
Well,
a democratic
you pass a law.
You're saying is
you
a democratically. What you're saying is a democratic elected Labour government
you're
will
saying-
immediately
No, that's on
break the
television.
law.
Jerry, not on
with
television.
legal action.
This is a
That's
different
right.
television.
You support Brexit already.
No, I don't. But anyway, Tel Aviv.
You're saying a democratically elected Labour government will go in and it will just mass break the law and say sue us.
No, it will pass a law that says the largest companies should be taken into public ownership. So that's passing a law.
Are you trying to?
Now,
Are you saying the same thing as Jeremy Corbyn, for example?
let me just give you the reason why I say this.
No, I'm asking us. Yeah.
And that is because if you have the decisive levers, the big banks and the biggest companies, for example, if you've got the 4 largest supermarkets in Britain, these supermarkets, every time you buy a tin of beans or a tin of corn in the supermarket, when you go bleep at the counter, the feedback mechanism goes right back to the farm. Sorry, what do you think? And no one else matters, you're the only one. Well, you're a hero. Well done.
Yeah,
What,
this
you drunk?
is my manifesto.
You drunk? Is that why you're behaving the way you are? Because you're going to look stupid on telly. You don't want to turn around to your mother and say, look at me, I'm behaving like an idiot. Do you really want to turn around to your family and show them this video? do you? Because you're going to look stupid. You are going to look stupid. Do you agree he's going to look stupid? Or is he looking clever?
Could you turn it over to Radio 4?
But I don't understand. You see, what we don't understand is the following.
Sorry, mate, sorry.
Why is it that you think everybody else is irrelevant and you're important? I'm standing, people have chosen to do it. No one asked you to do it. No one asked you to do it. You want, but you don't just want to be here, you want to be controlling here with noise. People have chosen to come here. No one has chosen to listen to you.
Everyone is supporting.
At least about hours.
No one chose to listen to you.
Yeah, but everyone do.
Yeah, we're at toilet and everything.
You're behaving like a fool, my friend. Okay, you've succeeded, I stop. Happy? How we got this?
We'll see. Let me finish from here first.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's finish from here first now before you show up.
My friend, you look like an idiot.
Whoa, where you go?
Moving away. Carry on as you are.
Okay.
Everyone wants to watch you. Stay here and see how many people want to watch you. Stay here.
Let's listen to this. Let's listen to this.
Wait, man.
I don't want to go. They made backs, no 550, my nigga. They say it first with a kiss of paint to a young 50, my nigga. I'm in court for your bitch ass. That's real shit.
The hell is he listening to?
Yeah, just take it.
Oh, just grow up. Well, you have. You played an instrument in front of everybody, which is illegal. Anyway, where were we? The gentleman here's question.
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
So, if you've got the decisive levers of power, what the gentleman there earlier on called the commanding heights of the economy, and 150 companies in Britain control 70% of the value of the stock market in Britain. And therefore, if you have those companies under public ownership, and the people vote, thank you very much, sir, thank you very much. People vote and say, we want, for example, education to be a priority, or we want transportation to be a priority, or we want pensions to be our priority. Then they can utilize the resources in these companies to develop the society in the way that the people want it to be developed. The problem in Britain is, not only in Britain but around the world is that these decisive levers of the economy are in private hands. And so, for example, something that can become or could become an instrument of human liberation, an instrument of freedom, an instrument of democracy.
Give us an example.
Facebook, Google.
They're American. You
Instead
said
of
British
this,
companies,
just
they're
one minute,
American.
I'm trying to explain the general phenomena so we understand. Instruments.
Yeah, but there's one thing to
No,
nationalise
come on, give me a
British
sec. Give me a sec. Give me a second. Give me. No. I was making an extrapolation onto the global scale so you can understand how I'm thinking about this question. If you have large companies that should be used for the assistance, technical and scientific assistance of humanity, what you actually discover is these instruments of or technical mechanisms of human liberation become instruments for spying on you, for squeezing money out of you, for making you pay rent to them every month to keep a mobile phone bill. What they should be doing is the opposite. They should say to everybody in Britain, having a high-speed internet connection everywhere in the country is a human right. Having an instrument that allows you to communicate is a human right. And everything you communicate should be your possession, not the possession of a private company.
A private American company.
Let me just explain. For example, you probably didn't know that if you share something, for example, on Facebook, if I post something on Facebook,
You don't use Facebook, do you?
if I post something on Facebook and 3 of my friends share it, who owns it? Mark Zuckerberg owns it. If 3 people share what you post, Mark Zuckerberg owns it.
Are you not
Now-
using his platform?
Sorry?
Are you not using his platform?
What do you mean? I mean, the point is,
If I set up a company and I paid money
I
to
understand
set
what
up
you're
that
saying.
company,
I understand what you're saying.
why do I have to use it for the
Because the
benefit
problem
of
is
everybody
this.
else? Why can't I just make money?
If you have enough money,
He's calling it a
you
human
can
right.
conquer an entire market. And if you can conquer an entire
There's
market,
laws against monopolies.
well, how do they operate today?
Because
We
they're
have
not-
bigger.
Because they're not
If there are
monopolies.
laws
You've
against
got
monopolies,
Instagram.
well, they're oligopolies. If you have giant corporations that are so vast that they control the marketplace, anyone who comes into the market, they buy them up. And so the consequence of that is you become part of their machine.
What's wrong with that?
What's wrong with it is, rather than becoming an instrument of liberation, Facebook, Google, Yahoo, Microsoft have cornered the entire market for global communication, and everything you do on there belongs to them, not to you.
But why does it have to be an instrument of liberation?
Well, this is the question. Do you want to have control over your life, or do you want to be controlled?
It's not about what I want, it's what you're claiming. You're
Well,
claiming that
I'm asking you, I am telling
You're
you,
claiming that these private businesses have to be places where people are liberated.
one minute.
Generate the idea.
Well,
You want to
Yes,
see
momentum
a real
on
politics,
Facebook.
a real leader, and you want to get a left-wing you're going to get it on Facebook.
it's a peculiar thing, you see, that when human beings learn to use new science and technology, they generally, because people are naturally conservative, they generally only notice, or they think they're moving very fast, when actually they could be moving 100 times faster. And so when, for example, the first motor car was invented, people who sat on it, literally, they shat themselves because they thought they were moving. My God, look how fast we're moving. Then, the next generation, aeroplanes were the norm. And the first people who got on aeroplanes, again, they were scared shitless. But now the car was normal. And then, you know, the next generation, well, you know, they had a First World War, terrible war. But the next generation, they saw the nuclear bomb. You can annihilate 100,000 people in 5 minutes. And so the speed at which humanity advances should also, in my view, and that's up to you whether you agree or not, in my view, if we technologically and scientifically advance, which is merely, that's all it is the collective endeavour of knowledge and activity of human beings.
What about
And
the
what
individual
Facebook
endeavor?
and Google do is they make you think that because, yes, I can communicate with 4,000 friends on Facebook, they make you think, oh, look how free he is. He can communicate with all those people. What they don't tell you, and you have to find out only after the event, is that they're using those 4,000 people and all the communications between them to spy on you and to control you. And that's what Ed Snowden revealed when he was working for the NSA. He showed, as a contractor, that even the President of America, even the Prime Minister of Britain, even the European Union, even the United Nations leaders are being spied on by mechanisms created between the NSA and the large internet companies who have gained such a vast global domination
Don't buy their
that
product.
most of us do not even realise
Use a cup-
how insignificant and weak we are
Use a
compared with
string
this
and cup.
enormous, mighty power created by our hands and our brains. And rather than our work, our hands, our brains controlling what we do, those things are used against us. That is essentially the question about the fate of humanity. Where do we go with the instruments that we create? If those instruments, for example, we now have it.
The problem is
Just let me.
It's not we that create these instruments. It's
Let me-
individuals
let me-
and it's their property.
Well, that's not true.
It is.
It isn't true.
It actually is.
The touch-tone screen,
if
who
you
made
don't
it?
want to use
The
their
touch-tone
products-
screen.
If you don't want
The
them
touch
spying on
screen.
you,
Who made the
don't
touch
use their
screen?
products.
Who made the touch screen?
Not you.
No, it was the American.
no right to
It was
it.
the CIA made the touch screen, right?
Okay.
Who made the microchip?
The FBI.
It was the American
Mossad.
military, right? Who made satellite global communications and Wi-Fi communications?
What's your point?
The point is it was public sector money that made these things. And the private sector rode on the back of that public sector money to accumulate the resources of the planet for themselves, as they have done with agriculture, as they have done with medicine, as they have done with culture, science, art,
This is why
technology.
I don't believe in taxes.
Sorry?
This is why I don't believe in taxes.
Well, whether you believe in
You're talking
taxes,
about the-
whether you
you're
believe
talking
in
about the
taxes is
liberation
irrelevant.
of- you're
Taxes
talking-
believe in you.
You're talking about the liberation of
Leon
the
Schatz, let
collective.
me just summarise it.
You're
One,
talking about the
just one,
liberation
I'll let you
of
come back one
collective.
second. Let you come back
What
one
about
second.
the individual
Are
and
you
his
going to
rights?
pay for the nationalisation of American corporations?
Leon
Answer
Trotsky
the
once
question.
said,
That's the
I'll
question.
answer him, give me a second. Leon Trotsky once said something very profound.
You're not
He
communist.
said, you may not believe in war, or you may not be interested in war, but war is interested in you. This mobile phone in your pocket is not a tool for you to communicate with your mates. It's a tool for them to make war on the people. To gather the knowledge, yes, to
Invest in
gather
this.
the knowledge
You don't
of
like
mankind.
Mark Zuckerberg. You don't like him. Invest in this.
What, and you think that's free from being used as an instrument of war against you?
It's better than what you're using.
In 1994, the Chechen rebel leader, Dudayev, was fighting against the Russians. And Boris Yeltsin at the time, he didn't like the rebel leader. So what did he do? He had a mobile phone like yours. And so he said, find out where he is. And they figured out where he was. And within 20 seconds, he was blown up by a laser-guided missile. And if you look at Baghdad, if you look at Afghanistan, if you look at Libya, that's how war is fought.
Well, that's what happens when you don't pay your monthly bill.
Frederick the Great once said, a general who knows the plans of his enemy will never need to fight another war. That is why the instruments of communication are actually the battleground of global war between the people and power.
You don't have to buy their products.
Sorry?
You don't have to buy their products.
You know what?
You could flip your argument on its head and say you could use that targeted
Of course.
attack.
Of course.
Somebody that did need
Of course. But let's deal with the facts of the world. If you want to flip that argument, you have to understand there is an argument. So, when you type on your screen, you remember the words. When you type on your screen, does it belong to you? No. It belongs to them. Right?
That's what
So-
I'm arguing. If you don't want them,
You've got one in your pocket as well.
I
The
do.
idea you can escape this is wrong. I agree with what the gentleman's saying.
I do because I
You
choose
can.
to. I'm not the one complaining about it. You're the one standing here and
Well,
saying,
that's true, of
"Oh,
course.
look, they're using these products." You're the one who chose. to
I
buy
am
these
describing the
products. I'm the
dynamics.
one who chose to
I
buy
am
this
not
from Nokia.
making a moral judgment. I'm describing what is happening. Then it is up to you. You may agree with them. You might think, oh, I want to make an app and make loads of money myself. Good for you. That's up to you. What you
you're doing
choose.
is selling
I can't
collectivism
expect
to us.
everybody in the audience to agree with me. I mean, when Mark Zuckerberg,
You're a hypocrite. You
Why does
use
that
an
make me a
Apple
hypocrite?
phone, you use these great technologies.
it doesn't make me a hypocrite.
Of course it is.
It doesn't make me a
it's a tool of
hypocrite.
If you were against corporate control
That
of
does
the
not make me a
technology,
hypocrite.
You would not use Apple, you would use
Opt out.
Android.
I agree
which
with
is
what you said a
open
minute
system.
ago.
Opt out.
Of course, these are instruments of war. And just the same as they are instruments of war, you know, when the IS want to gain recruits, they chop someone's head off and broadcast it on the internet. It's an instrument of war. And when the British military intelligence want to blow someone up somewhere in the world, they locate where they are on a GPS global positioning system, and they send a laser-guided missile to blow them up. That's the world we live in. And therefore, But more important than that, it's not just a direct conflict, hard kill. Look at the Brexit vote. Anybody watch the Dominic Cumberbatch thing? How did it happen, the Brexit vote? We all know the Trump vote. They manipulated it through Cambridge Analytica, based in New Oxford Street. They manipulated their control of the algorithms in order to manipulate the vote results, the opinions in society, in order to serve their purposes. And when that happened last year, that was revealed that Mark Zuckerberg had been handing over your data notes, to them.
He's platform.
They closed the bloody shop down. Was anybody put in prison? No. In fact, I went down to the headquarters of Cambridge Analytica, and I put, you can see on the internet, if you look up Cambridge Analytica, it was me standing outside Cambridge Analytica, calling for Nix to be put in prison. But to this day, he's not been put in prison.
Delete your Facebook.
Sorry?
Delete your Facebook if you're going to.
You see, you're being childish now.
No.
I am
agree with you.
explaining.
I don't use the social media at all.
I
You're
am
criticising it,
explaining
you're still using it.
the way that the instruments of production and communication that we produce. I mean, look, I say we. Chinese workers in a company called Foxconn, they make the iPhones, Samsungs, Huawei's and so on. So they're manufactured by about 1 million workers in China, right? They're then transported around the world and sold around the world in the shops, and then we put the input of data onto them. It's our data that is their property, and that data is used against us.
Because we've signed up to the T&Cs.
What do you mean signed?
When you signed up to join
My friend,
Facebook, you ticked
if
on
you
the
were to
T&Cs.
spend time, if you were to read,
I haven't joined any of them.
if you were to read the terms of conditions of every website and every program you use, that's all you would do.
No,
read the terms and
there are
conditions.
websites you can go to that give you the main point.
The main points not being the terms and conditions. The main points being a summation, concealing the terms and conditions.
Well, if you want the full thing,
Everybody in Britain, right? Everybody in Britain has got an opinion about Brexit, right?
Not me.
But how many people in Britain
I'm European.
have read the terms of the Leave Agreement? How many? No. Have you? Has anybody here read it? No. So if we don't read even the subject, which 3 years has been the centre of verbal masturbatory debate, how do you expect people to do that about hundreds of pages of legal agreements every single day?
Because we have MPs to read
That's
and
the way,
represent us.
that is the way in which the ruling classes con you into thinking that you have consented. You have not consented to the terms and conditions
Yes, you have.
of the... You have not.
You
What a
clicked
lot of...
yes.
My friend, I have been using the internet, and I've been using the internet since 1993. I've been using the World Wide Web since 1995. When I first started using those things, not one of them had terms and conditions. Not one of them. And when, if you got, 2.5 billion or 3 billion people users of Facebook, how many of them have ever read the terms and conditions? Of course it matters. Of course it matters.
They clicked yes.
Do you believe in private ownership?
My friend, have you read the Parks and Gardens Act? Have you read the Parks and Gardens Act?
What do you think their business model was made
Sorry?
on? It was about
You have, good for you. James, have you read the Parks and Gardens Act? But you come into Hyde Park every week.
Oh, I've read the notice on the board.
No, not the notice on the board, the Parks and Gardens Act.
I have a life.
I chose not to.
Exactly. Do you read the laws governing the use of McDonald's?
No.
But you use McDonald's.
That's right, but we're talking
Have
about
you read the
technology.
laws
We're
governing
talking about
Tesco
technology.
supermarket?
There's no,
The point is,
you
we
need
don't
to
use
tick a
it
box
and
to
then
come in the
complain about what the people making these
On the
products
contrary, you
There
do.
are- there
If
are
you
no
go
private
if you go
ownership.
into McDonald's,
Do you believe in private ownership?
what do you mean in
don't
private
need
ownership?
Do you believe in
legal
private ownership?
contract
You see,
to use
I
the
believe
park.
in the private ownership by individuals of personal property. I
Are
do not
corporations
believe.
individuals?
I do no, they're not. Corporations are fictitious individuals. They do not exist,
They're pretty real.
but they're fictitious.
They're pretty real.
The very definition in British law, and obviously you didn't know this, but this is the fact, the definition in British law of a company, of a limited company, is a person, a legal person.
Yes.
They have the right, like a legal person, like a real human being,
And that's an
to
established-
carry out
that is an
transactions
established legal
within
concept.
society.
Right.
However, they are not people. And if you own
They
a
are
company,
in respect to the law. If you want to read about this,
That's
read,
what I said.
read Noam Chomsky, and he will give you the.
well, you don't need
chapter-
Noam Chomsky for that. In British
Noam
law,
Chomsky will
in
give you the
British
chapter.
law,
Non-political.
every single company, if you go onto company's house in Britain, for £15 you can set up a company. I've got a company, a limited company. Or better said, I participate in running a limited company.
Are you gonna?
It's called Karl Marx Limited. It's a fact. It's a fact. You can buy shares.
How surprising.
Really?
Now, yes you can.
Sure.
Yes
Come
you
on.
can. You can join in, buy shares.
So I could buy-
They'll give you no votes though. But you can buy shares. You can share the dividends. Now, Karl Marx Limited is a separate entity to me and the company secretary, Mick Brooks. It's a separate entity.
Not a corporation.
In law, it can be sued. It can be found guilty of offences.
The point is you're not a
It can be
corporation.
made bankrupt. It can buy houses.
That's beside the
It
point.
can employ
You're
people.
not a corporation.
It can sack people. It can pay for people's health
You're a
insurance.
limited company, which is not a
It can
corporation.
even, well, it can employ thousands of people.
Is Facebook a limited company?
Of course it is. Of course it is. Well, it's a corporation of the United States of America. yeah.
Corporation.
Any case, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've had a. I would have a
I'm
sweet-
sharing the wealth with everybody. Sharing the wealth.
It's a slightly different issue, yes. But we haven't
Communism.
poisoned them, have you?
Okay, wait. I'll
Thank
take
you very much. They're very nice.
Can I ask a question?
One of my favourites. One final question.
Do you distribute the profits of your company equally between each of your employees?
We don't have any employees, actually.
Okay.
He's sharing the fruits of
We don't have any employees, and no, we would not.
Well, that's against Marxism in itself.
This is Karl Marx Limited, not Karl Marx
If it
philosophy.
was a Marxist, if you run a business,
what does the
you
Marx
should share all
family
of the
think of
profits between everyone.
Just as a funny little point here, if you look on the internet,
So you're a pseudo
because
Marxist.
no, not at all.
Well, you said
Marx
that if you made
himself
any money,
bought
you
and sold shares. Frederick Engels owned a factory. It's not correct to say that Karl Marx and Marxists do not believe. Marx even bought the patent to a printing machine in order to run a business.
And he wrote for the American press.
And he wrote for the American press. Not that that's relevant to this question, but never mind. It allowed you to make a comment about your reading.
He took the filthy lucre of the capitalist press.
He did take the devil's penny. That's true.
He kept it to himself.
And no, he didn't share it out.
He kept it to himself.
Because that is not the philosophy of Marxism. That's the philosophy of Christian communism, not Marxism. What was I going to say? There was a point I was going to make. What was that?
About Karl Marx and the family.
Oh, yes. This is quite an amusing one. And I'll finish on this. Because I wrote a book last year called Marx is London, which has been published, but only in China so far. But having said that, it was published by a prestigious publishing house called the Central Party School.
Was it edited at all?
It was published by the Central
Was
Party
it
School.
edited? Or censored?
I don't believe it was censored, but my Chinese is not good enough to know exactly. However, funny thing is I'm pretty sure that Xi Jinping read it. So that's not a bad member of the audience. Now, what was I going to say? Oh, right. So when I was doing research for this, I was investigating who the family members of Karl Marx are who are alive today. And there's a few of them in France and Belgium. Francois Longuet Marx and her children. But then, about a month ago, I found there's one of them living in London. Better said, in Kingston. And the newspaper article in the Surrey Comet said, Karl Marx's great-great-great-great-great-grandson is sleeping on the streets of Kingston and does parkour and skateboarding. But he hasn't studied the works of his famous ancestor. So on that note, I'm still trying to find him and get him up to Speaker's Corner and try and convince him, you know.
Can I mention a small
Hello.
detail?
Yes, one final point.
Me?
Yes.
It's me?
It's not you, no. He's a white guy, about your height. White guy, but it's not you.
Can I mention I was in Kinks about 3 weeks ago?
White guy about your
Well, there you go, that's a
And
connection.
near the town hall, there was a bloody poster for your walks.
I'm pleased
Stuff
to
on
hear
the
that.
bloody wall.
I'm
What,
pleased to
about
hear
10 feet up
I've
the
got no
wall?
idea who put
Nobody
it
could
there.
see it.
Exactly, I've got no idea. Well, you saw it.
Well, yeah, but
So obviously not. If you've got an eye, you see, the thing about Karl Marx posters, and I've got no idea who's putting them all around London, but the thing about Karl Marx posters is
I saw
that-
I saw a white man
is
about
that-
your height putting them up.
I saw them. I saw that guy as well. I don't know where he comes from. Any case, the thing about Karl Marx posters is, if you've got an eye for it, you'll spot them. So thank you very much for that, James. I'm glad to hear that.
I saw in
the word is getting
shops.
Good. I have been there, yeah. It's a communist plot. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen. See you later. It's a communist plot.
That's Marxist comedy for you.
Joke.
How much do you pay to go there?
£4.
Or you can climb over the wall at night.
So
You
anytime.
can see it from the park next door, but if you want to go in, you...
Content over everything. From your belly. Man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
To come to our feeling, to come to conclusion how to worship the Creator. That's why he sent the prophets and the messengers. But again, based upon God's mercy and justice and wisdom, when he sent the prophets and messengers, he did not just send them by telling them, claim you are a prophet of God, without giving them something that differentiated from the rest of the people. There's a criteria to differentiate between a liar and a true prophet. For example, of the criteria, the prophets of God, they were known to be trustworthy, truthful and honest. Why?